You ever see a statue that looks so real you almost expect it to blink? Well, the ancient Greeks were the absolute masters of that illusion. They figured out how to take a block of cold, hard marble and make it look like it was actually breathing. Today, we're going to dive into how they pulled off that incredible artistic journey.
It really all boils down to this one central question that artists obsessed over for centuries. How in the world do you take a block of stone and make the human eye believe that it's a living, breathing person? That's the puzzle we're going to solve together.
And believe me, it was quite a journey. This timeline gives you a really quick bird's-eye view of just how dramatic the change was. We're going to start with these super rigid, almost geometric figures, then move into the balanced, perfect forms of the classical era, and finish up with sculptures that are just bursting with emotion. It's like an artistic revolution in 3 acts.
Okay, so our story kicks off in what's known as the Archaic period. This was really the first big step towards celebrating the human form in a brand new way. This right here is our starting point. You look at these early sculptures like the Kouros figures, and they're impressive for sure, but they're not exactly lifelike, are they? See how they're standing bolt upright, perfectly symmetrical, just staring straight ahead? And they often have this kind of strange, serene expression. It's called the archaic smile. It was a little trick artists used not really to show happiness, but just to give a hint that the figure was alive.
So this comparison lays out the artistic problem perfectly. How do you get from the stiff, formal guy on the left to the relaxed, natural ideal on the right? Solving that puzzle, well, that was the key to unlocking true realism.
And the answer, the big breakthrough, came in the classical period. And this wasn't just a small step forward, it was a giant leap. Artists didn't just try to copy life anymore. They actually developed a formula for creating the perfect version of it.
So one of the key players here was a sculptor named Polykleitos. He had this idea that true beauty wasn't just in the eye of the beholder, it was in math. He created something called the canon of proportions, which was basically a precise set of rules for the ideal relationship between all the parts of the body. You can almost think of it as an algorithm for the perfect human form.
But, math wasn't the whole story. The other innovation, and maybe the even bigger one, was a technique called contrapposto. This word is probably the single most important concept to get this whole artistic leap. It's all about shifting the figure's weight onto one leg. Sounds simple, right? But it changed everything.
Here's how it works. When you shift your weight, try it right now. Your hips and shoulders don't stay perfectly level. One hip goes up and the opposite shoulder comes down, right? And that creates this natural, gentle S-curve in your spine. And there's the magic. That's exactly how a real person stands when they're relaxed. This one simple shift is the secret to making a statue look natural instead of stiff.
And here it is, in the flesh, in the stone. The Doryphoros, or spear bearer, by Polykleitos himself, is the absolute masterpiece of this new ideal. It perfectly follows his mathematical canon, and you can clearly see that relaxed S-curve of contrapposto. This is the moment stone really starts to look like flesh and bone.
And the impact of this new style was just monumental. To put it in perspective for you, out of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, one of them was a giant sculpture by Phidias, the master artist who was in charge of all the art for the Parthenon. That tells you everything you need to know about how important these statues were. They weren't just art, they were massive statements of human achievement.
But the Greeks didn't just stop at physical perfection. Oh no. Once they felt like they'd mastered the body, they moved on to the next big challenge, capturing the soul. This was all about getting beyond the perfect form to show character, feelings, and a real inner life.
This next shift was driven by a new generation of masters, and each of them was pushing the boundaries in their own way. You had Lysippus, who tweaked proportions to make his figures seem taller and more elegant. Then there was Praxiteles, who was daring enough to sculpt the first fully nude goddess, Aphrodite, which was pretty shocking at the time. And then you had Scopas, who became the master of drama, carving faces that were just twisted in anguish and passion.
So what this all means is that the very goal of art itself was changing. It wasn't enough anymore to just sculpt a perfect godlike body. Now, artists were fascinated with the complex, messy, beautiful inner world of their subjects, whether they were gods, heroes, or just regular people.
Now, this revolution that started in stone didn't just end with the Greeks. Its impact is echoed through thousands of years of art history. I mean, it's a legacy we still feel today.
The first people to really inherit this tradition were the Romans. They took all the Greek techniques, but they used them for completely different reasons. See, while the Greeks were sculpting these idealized, perfect gods,
The Romans were all about realistic portraits of their leaders and citizens. For the Romans, art wasn't about some divine ideal. It was about political power and personal identity.
But the influence didn't even stop there. This relentless Greek quest for naturalism, their mastery of anatomy, of dynamic poses, it basically provided the blueprint for the entire tradition of Western art. Fast forward a few centuries, and artists of the Renaissance would be looking back at these very same sculptures to relearn how to breathe life into their own work.
And that kind of brings us full circle, back to us. The Greeks used math and observation to create a formula for the perfect human. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What formulas, if any, does our art, our media, our culture follow today? What's our definition of the perfect human, and how do you think future generations are going to look back on it?